This is Umar Ahmed for IFL TV, proudly sponsored by Everlast. With me on this Sunday afternoon is trainer Jamie Moore. Thank you for jumping on. I was just talking before we start recording there. Unbelievable heavyweight fight. One of the best I've seen in recent times. I'm sure it's the same for you, Jamie.
Yeah, excitement-wise, you couldn't fault it. It was seemed to have everything. You know, it sort of went the way I expected in terms of the way eventually the outcome was, but there was so much more drama in between that from both sides. You know, I thought if Wilder was able to catch Fury, which, you know, it was a big ask because I felt he was going in there with little confidence coming off the previous two fights. I seen him weigh in. I thought that wasn't going to do him any favours because I thought it'd take away a bit of speed, which he did. But I mean, the right hand, what Fury got hit with, the first one, what put him down, that's put so many people to sleep. And you know, you can sort of argue in the first fight that Fury was moving away from the right hand, and sometimes that sort of takes away from it. He walked straight into that one last night, and even when he got up, you could see he was still a bit shaken. There was enough time left in the round for Wilder to capitalise. And then when he went down again, I thought, this is it now. He's not going to get through this. And luckily for Tyson, it was at the time in the round where, you know, the bell come just in the right time for him, and he survived it. But it was so exciting because you just sort of didn't know what was going to happen next.
Well, Wilder was very sharp in that first round, but we knew he wasn't going to be able to maintain that pace, especially with that extra weight coming into the fight. So was it going through your mind that it's got to be really early for Wilder? He's got to do this within 3 or 4 rounds, because if it goes past that, then he's really out the picture.
Yeah, well, so I was out for my mate's 40th today, so as you can imagine, we was all talking about it, and I was sort of going, you know, seeing as he's coming in heavier, he knows he's only got one chance. He's not going to outbox Fury. So I think he's going to have 4 rounds where he goes for it, and then, you know, he's going to sort of throw all his eggs into one basket. If it doesn't work, then he knows where he's at. So maybe that did happen. He did seem to come out a lot more technically astute. Like he really stuck to a game plan early on. But Tyson's experience never wavered. You know, his concentration never wavered. He was right in the commentary. He definitely came out sticking those body shots in consistently. Never veered away from that at all until towards the end of the first round. He just wasn't cute enough with it. You know, you could literally see he was trying to set him up for the right hand over the top, and he was blatant about it. You know, if he'd have been a little bit more cuter, or if he'd have been doing it for a few years, at least as the fight went on, then he'd sort of go back and forward into that tactic. Whereas as soon as it didn't work, he just went straight away from it. You know, after the first 2 rounds was out of the way, that bit of the game plan just went out the window, and he was just intent on trying to nail him with that right hand.
Do you think, in a way, with Deontay Wilder blowing everyone out for years and years, it's actually hindered him a little bit, because it might have got too late, where he could have perhaps adjusted and changed his style a few years ago, but maybe is it too late now for him to do so?
I'd say he's definitely too late. You know, at this stage in someone's career, you can refine stuff, you can tweak things, but to have an absolute overhaul of someone's style and make him a boxer, first of all, it's pointless with someone like Wilder, because you take away a lot of the things what are his best attributes. But stuff like, I mean, he can't. I'm not knocking him in this sense, because he doesn't need stuff like, he hasn't needed this type of stuff. So for me to say it's an essential thing, it's obviously not when you carry that sort of power. But, you know, he can't even parry a jab, or he can't even attempt to, you know, his head movement is basically non-existent, because from his point of view, an opponent actually trying to get off on you and land punches gives him the most opportunities. That's when that as soon as you try and open up and try and let your hands go, you're walking into shots usually. He's because of Tyson's dimensions and his awkwardness and his judgment of distance. I think his timing was off a lot last night, to be honest. Tyson, you could see he'd not boxed for a couple of years, because I think by the 6th or 7th round, an active Tyson would have got him out of there. He was still getting a little bit too close sometimes and allowing sort of. He was allowing Wilder to claim him a lot, whereas I think he'd have had him on the end of the shots and timed him onto his own right hand a lot better if he'd have been more active. But I think going back to the original question, you'd have took away nearly every single part of what made Deontay Wilder successful if you'd have tried to refine him and make him a pure boxer. It just wouldn't make sense.
What about the sheer determination and willpower of both men? Obviously, Tyson had Wilder down, and it looked like after that round he was going to get him out of there. And then the next round, Wilder drops him twice, and then Wilder tires, and Fury's getting on top of him. And then there was moments in there, even at the end, where Wilder was still throwing. Like, you could see he was tired, but he was still throwing Fury. And obviously, he went out chilled at the end. Both tremendous warriors, eh?
Yeah, without a doubt, you've got to take it out to both of them. And you look at Wilder and the situation from the last fight. I never in a million years would agree with a fighter to promise him I won't stop the fight and throw the towel in, because I think it got to a stage last night, and even though Tyson wasn't he wasn't able to exploit it that much. For a couple of rounds, Wilder was a sitting duck, and the way it finished was on the cards for a few rounds, and I've no doubt his old team in the same situation would have saved that from happening, and that's why your team's there. Wilder had got to the point where there was probably no chance of him winning that fight, but yet he was left in there for a few rounds longer to take that little bit more punishment, and for Tyson to finish off conclusively like he did do. Fighters need saving from themselves, basically. That's what I'm trying to say. And it's okay being brave and showing that grit and determination. But if he'd have got stopped by his corner 2 rounds before that, he'd already shown that. He'd already shown there was no quitting him. And this is the most dangerous sport in the world sometimes, especially if people aren't protecting you from yourself. And the long-term effects of stuff like that, where you're taking punishment for 2-3 rounds longer, you don't see that for 10, 15, 20 years. And that's what worries me. And people in the situation like that who've been brought on board, who don't know the fighter inside out, who financially getting paid a lot of money, so they do as they're told. It's a difficult situation to be in, because I don't. If we're going to totally unfavorably look after these fighters without thinking at all about money, then you've got to have the best interest at heart. You've got to make the right decision regardless of what the fighter says. Curtis Woodhouse made a good point on Twitter. He said, "I said it to every single trainer I had. Don't you dare pull me out of a fight. But if now I'm a coach, my fight is getting pulled out if I think that they're going to get hurt." And he's right. And I was the same. I would never have quit in a fight. But if any of my guys are ever in that position, that's the first. The way I view my job as a coach, that's probably the first rule: is look after your fight and protect them. Probably secondary to coaching them, which is weird because that's what you do day in, day out. You've only got to make that decision maybe 4 or 5 times in your whole career, where you've got to look at it in a big fight and go, I need to do the right thing here. But nevertheless, you've got to make that decision for the fighter. You're not doing it for you. You're doing it for your fighter, and not for that absolute instance. But you've got to be thinking about the long-term effects of it. You've got to go, this is just not good for his health. He's not going to win the fight. He's past the point of winning, and let's just save him.
I know you're speaking honestly there. Obviously, we saw that from yourself earlier this year in April with Frampton and Herring. Was there any point in that fight last night, going through round 7, 8, 9, 10, where you thought, if I was in Wilder's corner here, if I was Malik Scott, I'd throw that towel in?
Yeah, I think I'd have to go back and watch for the absolute instance. But there's twice I thought to myself, if the situation hadn't unfolded like it did last time, with the problems where Wilder complaining to his corner, sacking his team, then they probably would have. It was only because of the conversations they've had and what happened in the previous fight, the reason he was allowed to go on, I feel. And like I say, you could just see for those last couple of rounds, at any moment in time, that could have happened, what happened towards the end. And it was just that Tyson was getting a little bit close in his judgment, his timing and his judgment, the distance was a little bit off towards the end. But, maybe you could say Wilder was doing a good job of spoiling, but I don't think he was at that point in time. I think it was just instinctive survival mode. He wasn't thinking about doing it. He was just trying to claim and grab on. So yeah, the previous result and how it unfolded definitely affected their decision making, I feel, last night.
And just the last one to close off, away from the fight itself. Obviously, afterwards, Tyson went to Wilder's corner and paid his respects. That wasn't reciprocated from Wilder. Were you a little bit disappointed with that, Jamie?
It's tough. It's a tough one. When I seen Tyson's reaction, wholeheartedly agree with him. I think the vast majority of fighters, once the fight's over and the result's been conclusive, then you sort of go, if you're on the losing end of it, you sort of go, do you know what? Yeah, fair play, well done. I did it with Ryan Rhodes, for instance. In the interview at the end, I remember him trying to make out that, trying to get me to sort of imply that it was the weight. Or it was the weight was a big part of why I lost. And I was sort of saying, listen, regardless, it doesn't matter. Ryan Rhodes was the better man of the night. So you should always be humble in victory and defeat. And I understand Deontay Wilder must be bitterly disappointed, and probably he was probably not in a good way, sort of from a concussion point of view. He must have took a lot of heavy blows and probably wasn't thinking straight. He probably didn't really know where he was at that point in time. It was a bad knockout at the end. So maybe you can't be blamed too much. Maybe his team couldn't be blamed a little bit more than him, because maybe they should have been the ones who came over to Tyson and gestured to say, well done, fair play. That was conclusive as it can be. So I did agree with Tyson. Maybe they should have done it. But I just think that maybe Wilder wasn't in a position to do himself.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, Jamie, appreciate your time on IFL TV as always on last night's events.